Okay, so let's start by offering our respects to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
So which chapter are we reading?
Chapter 2.
Yes, what's the title? Contents of the Gita summarized. Okay, so as we discussed previously, this is divided into 5 sections. Which section did we start off in the previous class?
Arjuna's
second-
further surrender to Krishna.
No, that was in the previous to previous class. In the previous class, we started with section 2.
2.
Yes, section 2, and this section is titled Jnana Fight. So why this is titled as Jnana Fight is because Krishna is convincing Arjuna to fight based on the Jnana platform, based on the knowledge platform. And what is the knowledge he's giving him here? He's giving the knowledge of the difference between the body and the soul. So right away, we saw previously how Krishna goes to the root of the problem. The root of Arjuna's problem is that he is on the bodily concept. He is on the material concept, right? So based on Jnana, he tries to convince Arjuna to fight. After that, in section 3, he will try to convince Arjuna on the karma platform. So that we'll see in section 3. In this section, section 2, it's solely on the basis of Jnana. That's why this is titled as Jnana. Okay. So we saw a very, very important verse. This one, 2.12 is very, very important to understand the basic concept where Krishna is saying, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So there are two important lessons here. One is that the soul is eternal, and the other is that the soul is an individual entity. So never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these things, which means all of us as spirit souls, we have always existed. So the eternality of the individuality is explained here. Also, many people think that after liberation, the soul is merged with the Lord and the soul does not exist. But that's not what Krishna is teaching you. He's saying that you will always exist. So even post-liberation, whether you're in the spiritual world or even when we are in the material world, the soul, we continue to exist as individuals. And we saw one example to explain this concept. Anybody remembers what example we saw? How we maintain our individuality always, even when we are one with the Lord. What example did we see?
Mataji, I think the watermelon example.
Yes, exactly. Very good.
Example of watermelon.
Yes, yes, correct. Exactly. So we saw this example of the watermelon. Although the seeds are one with the fruit, still the seeds are maintaining their individuality. So we are eternal and we are individual. We don't lose our individuality ever. There never will be a time in the future, nor there was a time in the past when we did not exist as individuals. So these are two very important concepts that we learn in 2.12. So this is a very, very important verse. So then, of course, we saw the Vaikuntha and we saw how the spiritual world is in the form of a lotus and how the material world is a dark cloud in one corner of the spiritual sky. We saw the three Vishnus. Do you remember the names of the three Vishnus?
Yeah. Vishnus?
Yes,
One
the three
was
Vishnu.
Mahavishnu.
Kshirodayika.
Who are the three Vishnus?
Kshirodayika
Mahavishnu,
Vishnu.
Garabhyodakashya.
Garbhodakshai Vishnu, Mahavishnu, and Kshirodakshai Vishnu.
Okay. So who's the first expansion of Krishna in the material world?
Mahavishnu.
Mahavishnu. Yes.
Garbhodayika.
No. Mahavishnu is Krishna's first expansion in the material world. Okay. And another name of Mahavishnu is?
Karnodakshai.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Karanodakashai Vishnu. So then from Mahavishnu or Karanodakashai Vishnu comes the next Vishnu and his name is?
Garbhodakshai.
Yes, exactly. Garbhodakashai Vishnu. And then from Garbhodakashai Vishnu comes?
Kshirodakshai Vishnu.
Yes, exactly. Kshirodakashai
Kshirodakashai
Vishnu.
Vishnu.
So Neha has taken down notes. Very nice.
Mhm.
Okay. So what does Mahavishnu do?
If he breathes in, he destroys the planets that he made. And if he breathes out, he makes the universes.
Yes, he is creating the universes by his breathing, isn't it? Then what does Garbhodakashai Vishnu do?
He's in charge of every universe.
He enters the universe and creates Brahma, I think.
Yes, he enters into each universe. So how many Garbhodakashai Vishnus exist?
Millions and millions.
Yes, millions and millions, because there are millions of universes. Therefore, every universe has its own Garbhodakashai Vishnu. Then what does Kshirodakashai? So you can see here, we have Mahavishnu creating these universes. And then Garbhodakashai Vishnu enters into each universe. Then what does Kshirodakashai Vishnu do?
Kshirodakashai Vishnu enters each entity
He maintains
as
all
like
The
a
heart
super
of every
soul.
living entities.
Yes, he enters into the heart of every living entity, and we know him better as the Param
Super
Atma
soul.
or the super soul. Yes. Okay, today everybody is in great form. Okay, then we saw how the body is continuously changing from Kaumaram to Yauvanam, from Yauvanam to Jara, from boyhood to youth to old age. And when the
Old age.
body is very old, then the soul transmigrates to another body. So that only means we are going from one body to another body. If we are going to the spiritual world, then we take a spiritual body. And if we are still in the material world, we take a material body. Okay. So then we saw this concept of cage polishing civilization, how most of the human population are more concerned about keeping the cage clean,
Cage.
keeping our bodies fit, but we have forgotten to feed the bird inside the cage. We have forgotten to take care of the soul inside, right? So this is the cage polishing civilization. Okay, so today we will start from 2.14. Please repeat. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om
Om
Namo
Namo Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Okay.
Matra sparshastu kaunteya Shitoshna sukha dukkhadaha Agamapayino nityaha Tam stidikshasva bharata Yam hi navyatha.
1 second. So who can read the translations today? Any volunteers?
I can.
Okay. And so that was Disha, right?
Yes.
Okay. And a volunteer to read the other text?
I can read.
Okay, Varsha. Thank you.
Gotcha.
Translation. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed.
So what Krishna is saying here is, now that you have, so first of all, he has told Arjuna that you are the spirit soul, you are not this body. You are a soul who has this body. So now that you have this body, what you are supposed to do, you have to tolerate the ups and downs that come with this material. So he's saying, just as how the climate changes, in the same way, we go through suffering and we go through distress and we go through happiness. Yes. So we have to tolerate these changes that come with this body. By what names does Krishna refer to Arjuna in this verse?
Kaunteya.
Yes, Kaunteya. What does that name Kaunteya mean?
Son of Kunti.
Son of Kunti. And another name of Arjuna?
Bharata.
Bharata.
Bharata. Yes. What does that mean?
Descendant of Bharata dynasty.
Yes, correct. So when he refers to him as Kaunteya, he's referring to his heritage from his mother's side. And when he's referring to him as Bharata, he's referring to his heritage from his father's side. So from both his mother's side and his father's side, Arjuna comes from a great heritage, isn't it? And when you belong to such great families, then with it comes a responsibility. So he's telling you that, yes, you belong to great families from both your mother and father's side, blood relations from both the sides. So therefore, you have to be responsible, take responsible decisions. You cannot escape your duties. You have to fulfill your responsibility and fight. That's why here he's referring to him as Kaunteya and Bharata.
How the Bharata is connected with the parental? How the Bharata is the reference?
Yes. Bharata was one of his ancestors.
Bharat, Maharaja Bharat.
Yes, Maharaj Bharat, that's correct.
Okay.
So accept the unavoidable. The unavoidable is temporary. So distress or suffering cannot be avoided when we have this material body. Nobody can say that I have never gone through any problem in my life. Such a person does not exist. And if he says so, that means he's only speaking lies. So we cannot avoid distress, but this unavoidable is temporary. Why? Because once we get rid of this material body and we attain the spiritual realm, in the spiritual realm, there is no suffering. There is no distress. There is only ananda. There is only bliss. Okay. So this unavoidable is temporary as long as we are residing in this material realm or as long as we are in the material concept of life. Now, question, why does the Gita urge us to tolerate both the pleasant and the unpleasant? So tolerate the unpleasant, tolerate the distress, tolerate the problems. Yes, we can understand we have to tolerate it. But when there is something nice going on in our lives, when something is very pleasant, why should we tolerate the pleasant? Who can answer this question?
That way we will be able to balance our life, and we will be in a position to understand what is happiness and what is a sorrow.
Okay, very nice. Anybody else wants to give their perspective?
Yeah, it won't be long lasting, where nothing is long lasting.
Okay,
Just
even
something.
the happiness does not last long. Okay, very nice. Any other perspectives?
So that we don't have the ghamand in us, the ego, that once the good has happened, bad can also happen. So that's why we see both the aspects in life. Be aware of.
Okay, so that we don't get egoistic when everything goes well. Okay, any other perspectives?
So not too happy when you're pleasant and not too sad when it's unpleasant.
So why tolerate the pleasant?
Similarly, it teaches also to tolerate the unpleasant also, right? So a balance between the both.
Let's take an example. Let's say that
Can
we
I say
have
one example?
sorry?
Can I say one example?
Yes.
Yeah, whatever goes up, it has to come down. So we have to take both, and we have to tolerate both the things.
Okay. Okay.
I
Very nice.
think that pleasant word which we are using, it is for material word. You know, it is a tolerance with our physical existence, not with the soul.
Okay. Yes. Yes, Krishna here is saying that only now that you have this body, which of course is in the material world only, then you have to tolerate both pleasant and unpleasant. Yes, that is correct. So let's try to understand this with an example. Let's say we have arranged for a world tour, right? And we have everything arranged. We have our tickets, we have our hotel bookings, we have packed our bags, everything is all set, and we are very happy that we are going on a world tour. But suddenly, just a couple of days before travel, we are down with some disease. Something has happened. Okay? Let's say typhoid. And now all our plans have been, it's gone. Everything is gone. We cannot travel. Now what happens? If I was very, very excited because of my world tour, my upcoming world tour, now that that thing has been cancelled, now there is distress, then the disappointment of that happiness will affect me more than the disease itself. It will create more negativity in me. The disease may not damage me so much than the disappointment of my plans being cancelled will cause. Okay. So if we are going to be very happy, then when the distress comes, then it is going to affect us even more deeply. Yes. But if we are equipoised, when we are not too excited when there is happiness, and we are not too negative when there is distress, then we maintain our balance. So that's why we don't have to sensationalize the sensation. When we are happy, let's not sensationalize it so much that then later the disappointment of it is going to affect me very deeply. Okay.
Attachments. Basically, it is attachment, no?
Yes, yes. Okay, so this is a picture that depicts a person called Gopakumar. This is a book written by Sanatan Goswami. The book is called Brihat Bhagavatamrita. It's there in your Veda base. If you like to read, you can read it there. So in this book, Sanatan Goswami, who was a disciple of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is describing how a living entity called Gopakumar, he goes through so many realms, yeah, he crosses through so many material planets, and after a lot of difficulties and hindrances, finally he reaches the spiritual world. And when he reaches Goloka, he is embraced by Krishna, and Krishna welcomes him and he tells him that I have been waiting for you for so long. Where have you been? I've been waiting for you and welcome back to the spiritual realm. And you can see that the other residents of Goloka are also there. They're also there and they're also welcoming him back to the spiritual realm. So one should not just focus on what lies around us, right? Around us, there is happiness and there is distress. But we have to focus on what lies ahead. So sometimes in our spiritual life, we may go through some difficulties, right? As we discussed in the first, our introductory class itself, that how taking up this course is like swimming against the current. Because Maya Devi does not want us to become self-realized. Her service is to take us away from Krishna. So when we are swimming against the current, we have to have a lot of determination. And if we focus on what lies ahead, what is our goal, then it will help us overcome these difficulties. But if we are only focusing on the problems that are lying around us, our temporary problems that come with this body, then we will not be able to overcome those hindrances. So this picture can remind us, yes, just as how we are all like Gopakumars, right? And when we are all also going through our struggles. And finally, our goal is to reach the spiritual realm. So this picture can help us focus on, yes, this is our goal and how we can overcome our problems or our hindrances and swim against the current. Which book did we mention? What is the name of the book? Does anybody remember?
Brihad Bhagavatam.
Brihad Bhagavatam.
Yes, Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Who is the author?
Sanatan Goswami.
Sanatan. Yes, Sanatan.
Sanatan.
Okay. Now another question. Does tolerance as recommended in the Bhagavad Gita mean that I just passively accept everything, even injustice? Does that what tolerance mean?
No.
That I have to tolerate even injustice? Is that the lesson we learned from the Bhagavad Gita?
No. No.
So explain, please.
I would not say that we have to accept injustice. Nowhere I feel what I have learned till now from Gita, Krishna does not or never ever say that you have to accept injustice. Rather, you have to decide which side you have to take. And every time when he explains that, he gives us the path and he leaves the decision on the other soul to decide where to go. But he never teaches you have to go this way or you have to do this is what is right and you have to do this. He never ever says that.
Yeah, he does teach us that this is the right path, but he doesn't force us to follow the path, right? Because at the end of the Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna that now I have given you this knowledge. Now it's up to you what you want to do. So yes, he does teach us, but he doesn't force us to follow. Okay. Any other perspective?
Because justification, we have to see the pramanas as we read the Pratyaksha Pramana and some other pramanas, which is showing to justice, because we cannot justice due to this, what we are feeling, due to what we see. So injustice, we cannot decide ourselves that what is injustice or justice. This is what really it is in our front of that only we decide that it is justice. So we cannot accept justice or injustice, both the situation immediately. So I just passively accept, it's a passively accept means that you should know that what is exactly the justice.
Okay, for that one has to be knowledgeable in Shastric studies. Okay. No, but let's say we know what is justice and injustice. Yeah, Neha.
I feel that whatever happens according to God's will. So who are we to decide good, bad, justice, injustice? So when we have that blind faith, I mean the Atal Vishwas, the true faith, then we have to accept whatever comes in our way.
No,
think
there
also
are some creation of all the things are not according to God, but Maya is also there. There are some.
When
Okay,
God
wait. Yeah, let's
think-
clear this. Bareya was saying something. Yes.
Yeah, I would like to say, I think here Lord Krishna is teaching us in Bhagavad Gita to have an equal-mindedness, samyak drashti, that don't be affected by injustice, justice, or a pleasant, unpleasant situation. Develop that attitude towards life where you are equal-minded, having a samyak drashti, not affected.
Okay. So let's clear what Neha and Munesh were discussing. So there are 2 points here. Everything happens according to God's will. That is correct. But still, we entities have what we call as minute independence. As we said, at the end, Krishna tells Arjuna, now you do what you want to do. Okay. So that minute independence, all of us have. So we make our choices. Okay. And coming to what Munesh Prabhu said, that yes, Maya also exists according to Krishna's will only. That service has been given to Maya by Krishna only to test the souls do you really want it? Okay. So nothing can exist without the sanction of Krishna, but still at the same time, we have minute independence to decide what we want to do. And that's why we have what we call as karma or the karmic reaction. Suppose whatever we are doing, Krishna is only making us do, then there is no point in karma. Why should we take the karma of something if Krishna is making us do? So we take the karmic reaction only because we are using our minute independence or our minute free will to, to take the decisions. And what we are today, the kind of body that we have, is a result of what we did in a previous lifetime. Yes. And our future body will be decided by what we are doing now. So the moment-to-moment decisions we make will determine our next destination. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, now coming to this question. Now Krishna is telling Arjuna to tolerate both happiness and distress. But the same Krishna in the same Bhagavad Gita did not tell Arjuna to tolerate the injustice that Duryodhana is doing or the injustice that Dhritarashtra is doing. There, Krishna is telling Arjuna to fight the war. There, he's not telling him to tolerate. Yes. So we have to understand the content of the subject matter. We have to understand the context to understand the content. Sorry, you have to understand the context in what something is spoken to understand the content. So here we understand that yes, Krishna is telling Arjuna to tolerate the ups and downs, but he doesn't tell him to tolerate the injustice that is meted out by Dhritarashtra or Duryodhana. So what do we have to learn from this is, we don't have to tolerate the injustice. We have to decide when we are going to apply this, okay? Which battles of life are less important and which battles of life are more important where we have to deal with it. There is a difference in running away from a problem and walking away from a problem. When there is something insignificant, we walk away from the problem because we don't want to waste our time and effort in something trivial, right? But when there are big things in life, then we have to, we should not run away from the problem. We have to face the problem and we have to solve it. Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay. So content is critical for comprehending content. If we just take one verse out of context and we quote it, then there is every possibility that it will be misunderstood. And that's the reason why so many people are running away from religion. They will quote something out of context. Yes, and they will say that, no, this is what is written in this book and this is what I will follow. But later, there may be something coming after that and something coming before that, which also have to be understood to understand the whole thing in totality. There are some things that Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, but in the future verses, he says that, yes, but this is a higher truth than the previous truth. So for that, you have to read the Gita in its entirety. the whole thing, to understand it in the right perspective. Okay. 2.15.
नो नित्याः तांस्ति दीक्षस्व भारत यं हि न व्यथयन्त्येते पुरुषं पुरुषर्षभ समदुःखसुखं धीरं सोऽमृतत्वाय कल्पते.
O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation.
So what Krishna is saying here is, he's saying that Purusha is Purusha Rishabha. Second line, which Purusha is Purusha Rishabha? Purusha Rishabha means the best among men. So which man is the best amongst all men? He who is Sama, Dukkha, Sukham, Dhiram. One who is equipoised in both happiness and distress. That person is Purusha Rishabha. He is the best among men, he says. And when he is equipoised, then what is it that he attains? He attains Amrit
Liberation.
Vaya Kalpate. Yes, he is eligible for liberation. So previously he said that you have to tolerate the distress. And in this verse, Krishna is talking the result. If you can tolerate both, then what is the result of that? He explains in 2.15. What is the result? That we will be eligible for liberation. Okay, so here for the first time in the Gita, Krishna is talking about a spiritual goal. First time he talks about liberation in 2.15. 16.
नासतो विद्यते भावो न भावो विद्यते सतः उभयोरपि दृष्टोऽन्तस्त्वनयोस्तत्त्वदर्शिभिः.
Translation: those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, the material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both.
So within section 2, there is a subsection from 2.16 to 2.25, where Krishna is going to give the opinion or the vision of the seers of the truth. Not opinion, but vision. Vision is a proper word. The vision of the seers of the truth, the saintly people, what is their vision? So this is a subsection within section 2 from 2.16 to 2.25. So what is it that he's talking about here? Krishna is talking about two natures, the material nature and the spiritual nature, or the difference between the body and the soul, or the difference between the matter and spirit. So what he's saying, that the material body is non-existent. What does that mean? It is temporary, and the soul is eternal. So the body is temporary. Once we die, then this body is just disposed of, isn't it? The body turns into ash or stool or dust. When does it turn into ash?
When it's burnt.
When it is burnt. When does it turn into stool?
When it is buried.
No, when it is buried, it turns into dust. When does it turn into stool?
When it's eaten by birds.
Yes. What categories? I mean, who leaves the dead bodies to be eaten by the wild birds?
Parsis.
Yes, exactly, the Parsis. So everyone has their own method of disposing the dead body. But anyway, finally, this body is temporary. So it is going to be turned into dust or stool or ash. But the soul is eternal. The soul never changes. The soul is constant. Only the body is continuously changing. Okay. Let's read this text.
Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explained to Sanatana Goswami that there are three purposes in the Vedas. One is to understand our relationship with Krishna, Sambandha. Another is to act according to that relationship, Abhideya. And the third is to reach the ultimate goal, Prayojana.
So all Vedic scriptures or any Shastra, basically they teach us three things. What are the three things? Sambandha, Abhideya and Prayojana. The first thing that we need to know to come from avidya, from ignorance to jnana to knowledge. All right. So what is the basic avidya that most people have? Their ignorance is one, either they identify themselves with the material, they think that we are this body. That is first avidya. Or the other avidya they have is they think that I am God. They think that we are the controllers. God does not exist. We can control everything. There is science behind everything, they would say. So there are two kinds of avidyas. Either I think that I am the body, I am material, or I identify that I am God. To come from avidya, from ignorance to knowledge to jnana, the Vedas teach us three things: sambandha, abhideya, and prayojana. So what is sambandha? Sambandha means who am I, who is God, and what is my relationship with God. Sambandha means relationship, right? So first of all, any shastra will teach us who are you, who is God, and what is your relationship with God. So now I'm the spirit soul, right? God is a supreme controller. And what is my relationship with God? My relationship with God is that I am the eternal servant of the Lord. I cannot become God. I will always remain his eternal servant. Once that the relationship is explained to us, the next step is abhideya. So now that I know that I am the servant of God, what am I supposed to do? Right? So how am I going to act? That is abhideya. I know the relationship. Now what I have to do after I know my relationship with God? Now I have to engage in devotional service. I have to serve the Lord. That is abhideya. And when I engage in devotional service, when I serve the Lord, what is the ultimate goal? What do I get in return? That is prayojana. Ultimate goal is prayojana. So this we have to remember as SAP. Okay, we will be using this in the future classes also. So please remember SAP, SAP, Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. Now, what knowledge has Krishna given to Arjuna so far? Sambandha, Abhideya, or Prayojana?
Sambandha?
Yes, exactly, Sambandha, because he is telling Arjuna that you are the spirit soul, you are not this body. So first of all, he is telling him the Sambandha. Later, we will see how Krishna also gives him the Abhideya Gyan and the Prayojana Gyan. But he speaks about Abhideya and Prayojana, but now Krishna has given him Sambandha Gyan. So any Shastra will teach us these three things: SAP, Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana. Sambandha, who am I? Who is God? What is my relationship with God? Abhideya, okay, now I know the relationship. What am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to engage in devotional service. And as a result of engaging in devotional service, what is it that I get in return? What is the ultimate goal? That is Prayojana. Okay, so please remember this: Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana.
It is act according to the relationship or transformations according to relationship.
No, there is no transformation, because the spirit soul is eternally a servant of God. Eternally. Whether you are in the material world or we are in the spiritual world, we have to serve the Lord. We cannot become God. We cannot be at the equal level. We are always subordinate. We always have to serve him.
Act means that you have to change according to God, the God's sambandha, or it is act as a services.
No, act means our actions. What are we going to do? What is our action after we know our relationship? Is it okay?
It's okay.
Okay. Can we proceed? 2.17.
Avinashi tu tadviddhi yena sarvamidam tatam vinashamavyayasyasya na kaschit kartumarhasi.
That which pervades the entire body you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul.
So Krishna is saying that something is avinashi. Avinashi means it cannot be destroyed. Uska vinash nahi ho sakta. It cannot be destroyed. It cannot be perished. So what is that avinashi? Sarvam idam tatam, that which pervades the entire body. So what do you mean by pervading the entire body? When the spirit soul is present in the body is alive. We are alive. When the spirit soul leaves the body, that is death, isn't it? The only difference between
Occupying
a
body?
dead, sorry,
Pervades means occupying the body?
what means occupying the body?
Pervades.
Pervades. No, pervades means it is giving consciousness to the entire body. It's
Okay.
spreading its effect in the entire body. The whole body is alive, right? Pervades means it's going into all parts of the body. It's like activating it.
Okay.
Yeah. When the soul leaves the body is only a dead body. The only difference between a living person and the dead body is what? Only thing that is absent is the soul. Because the body, the dead body has the same eyes, the organs, ears, nose, hands, legs, everything is there, right? Everything is there of that person. The only thing that is absent now is what? The spirit soul. As long as the spirit soul is present in the body, the person is alive. The moment the spirit soul leaves the body, the person is dead. It's a dead body, right? And then when the soul leaves the body is just disposed. So the body has value only as long as the soul is present in the body. Here in the purport, Prabhupada, he quotes from the Upanishads. Actually, I think that all of you must start reading the purports before the class, because these purports are very, very important. If you don't have the Bhagavad Gita as it is with you, you can go to vedabase.io, click on Bhagavad Gita, and you can read there, and you read the purports. All these purports are very, very important. We are not going to read all the purports here in the interest of time. Otherwise, we will be doing this course for the next 7 years, right? So please read the purports in your house before our class. Let's read this.
Everything in world can be measured, but scientists cannot measure the size of the soul within the living body, which is 1/10,000th times the tip of the human hair. The Shvesta Svatara Upanishad confirms Balagra Sata Bhagyasyaha Satadaha Kalpitasya Cha Bhago Jivaha Sa Vigneyah Sa Kanatyaya Kalpate. When the upper point of a hair is divided into 100 parts, and again each of such parts is further divided into 100 parts, each such part is the measurement of the dimension of the spirit soul.
So Prabhupada quotes from the Upanishads and tells us what is the size of the spirit soul. This soul that is pervading the entire body, that is keeping the whole body alive, what is the size of that soul? So what is the size? If you take the tip of the hair and divide it into 10,000 parts, one part is the size of the soul. That's how small, that's how tiny the soul is, but it is so potent, isn't it? Such a small, it's very small in size, but the potency is that it keeps the person alive. So we see the size of the soul is 1/10,000th part of the tip of the hair. Then he again quotes from the Upanishads to explain more. Let's read this.
Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.9. Eso nuratma setasya veditavyo yasmin pranaha panchada samvivesha pranaisha chitam sarvam otam prajanam Yasmin Vishrudhe Vibhyate Esa Atma. The soul is atomic in size and can be perceived by perfect intelligence. The atomic soul is floating in the 5 kinds of air: prana, apana, vyana, samana, and udhana. Is situated within the heart and spreads its influence all over the body of the embodied living entities. When the soul is purified from the contamination of the 5 kinds of material air, its spiritual influence is exhibited. The Hatha Yoga system is meant for controlling the 5 kinds of air, encircling the pure soul by different kinds of sitting postures, not for any material profit, but for liberation of the minute soul from the entanglement of material atmosphere.
So what do we learn from this? The soul is floating in 5 kinds of air. So there are 5 kinds of air that circulates our body. And the soul is floating in these 5 kinds of air. And when now see, the soul is in our body, right? And these airs are in our body like this. As long as the soul is in the body, it is entrapped within these 5 kinds of air. And when these 5 kinds of air do not exist anymore around the soul, that means that the soul has become liberated. So each of these airs has a certain function to perform in the body. Let's read.
The 5 airs have the following functions. Prana governs intake and forward momentum. Its main function is respiration. Apana governs elimination and outward momentum, elimination of stool, urine, semen, and menses. Vyana governs circulation. It coordinates all activities with the nervous system, giving liveliness in every part of the body. Samana governs digestion, assimilation, and consolidation, nourishing the whole body, giving health. Udana governs growth and upwards movement, vomiting, speaking, singing.
So these are the 5 kinds of air, and the soul is floating in these 5 kinds of air within the body. So prana vayu is the air or the vayu that is whose main function is respiration, breathing. That's why when somebody passes away, they say that uske pran nikal gaye. So the respiration, the breathing has stopped, and that name comes from prana vayu. Okay. And what else we learn from here is the location of the soul. See, in the 3rd line of the first paragraph, it's written that is situated within the heart. So where in the body is the soul located? The soul is located in the core of our hearts. Even medical science accepts that the heart is the center of all energies in the body. There are 2 main organs in the brain and the heart. One can be brain dead, but he still continues to live. But there is no concept saying that the heart is dead, but this person still continues to live. So when the heart stops beating, that means the person is declared dead. Why? Because the soul is present in the core of the heart. And that's why the heart is the seat of all energies in the body. So the soul is 1/10,000th of the tip of the hair. The soul is floating in 5 kinds of air, and it is situated within the core of the heart of all living entities, not only human beings. Okay, even in the small ant also, the soul is situated in the heart of that living entity. And what does a soul do? The soul gives consciousness. Let's read this text first.
The soul, the consciousness, a living being. The symptom of the soul is the consciousness which pervades the entire body. When a person is living, he has consciousness. When he is dead, there is neither the consciousness nor the soul.
So the symptom of the soul is the consciousness which pervades the entire. How do you know that the soul is present in the body? We know because the body is conscious, the body is alive, it can react to external situations. So we know that the soul is present. The symptom of the presence of the soul is that there is consciousness. If the soul is absent, that means the person is dead. So the symptom of the soul is the consciousness which pervades the entire body. So the soul is pervading the body. Nothing pervades the soul. Nothing can go inside the soul. See, the word pervade, anything, when something pervades, say A pervades B, it leads to destruction of B. For example, when a bullet pervades the body is going to be destroyed or die, or the person may survive, but it's like a destruction that's taking place, right? Termites will enter the wood and can destroy the wood. Water will enter the body of a drowning man and will cause the death of the person. So when something pervades, it leads to destruction. So the soul pervades the body, yes, but nothing can pervade the soul. That is the potency of the soul. As long as the soul is present, we say that the person is alive. For example, see, even we know, even if we don't read the Bhagavad Gita, even if a person has no knowledge of Sambandha Gyan, right? What is that? We are spirit souls. Once the person is dead, we refer to the person as a body, right? We don't say, did you put Mr. Carlos in the electric crematorium? We say, did you put the body in the electric crematorium? Yes. And if that Mr. Carlos is undergoing treatment in the hospital, we don't say that, is the body in the hospital? No, then we refer to as Mr. Carlos. Is Carlos in the hospital, we say. We don't say, is the body in the hospital? Then his relative will say, what do you mean? My father is still alive. What do you mean the body is in the hospital? So we know when to use the word body and when to use the name of a person to refer to that person. Even if we have not read the Gita, we still know when to use the right words. Why? Because this knowledge is there in us. The soul knows it by default. Only thing, we have forgotten it. So we need an external person to come and tell us, a superior person to come and tell us that you are not the body, you are spirit soul. But just by default, the soul knows that once the soul has left, the person is referred to as a dead body. As long as he is alive, we refer to him by his name.
So this, by default, this memory, it is controlled by soul?
Yeah, the super soul has 3 functions. Later we will see. The super soul gives us knowledge, forgetfulness, and remembrance. Right? The super soul in the heart gives us knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. We will see that later in detail. Okay. 2.18.
Antavanta ime deha nityasyokta sharirinaha anashino prameyasya tasmad yudhyasva bharata.
The material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end. Therefore, fight, O descendant of Bharata.
So here Krishna is saying that all these dehas, all these bodies are antavanta. Antavanta means they are destroyable. All these bodies can be destroyed. The material body of the indestructible, immeasurable. So what is that indestructible, immeasurable? It's the soul. But the body of the soul is sure to come to an end. He says antavante. So what Krishna is telling Arjuna is that even if you don't kill them, they will anyway die because the body is sure to come to an end. What word in Sanskrit means that the soul is immeasurable?
Nityasya. Aparameyasya.
Aprameyasya, yes. Aprameyasya means the soul is immeasurable. So is it okay? Can we accept it?
Yes, it is okay.
But didn't we just measure the soul? Didn't we just say that the size of the soul is 1/10,000th part of the tip of the hair?
I think it is given by God. We cannot measure it.
Ah, yes, we cannot measure it. Materially, it cannot be measured. We just take the knowledge from Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Yes. So that is correct. Okay. 2.19.
ययेनं वेत्ति हन्तारं यश्चैनं मन्यते हतम् उभौ तौ न विजानीतो नायं हन्ति न हन्यते.
Neither he who thinks the living entity the slayer, nor he who thinks it slain is in knowledge, for the self slays not nor is slain.
Neither he who thinks the living entity is the slayer. Slayer means what? The killer. So if Arjuna is going to kill and he thinks that he is the one who is killing, then he is not in knowledge. And he who thinks it is slain, one who thinks that he has killed him, that the person has been killed, is also in avidya. Even he is not in knowledge. Okay. So neither is Arjuna the doer, nor is the person being killed. The person cannot be killed because he is a spirit soul. The soul can never die. And plus Arjuna, when Arjuna is going to kill now, he is only doing it under the direction of Krishna. So he is not the one who's going to take the karmic reaction. Just like how an army man, if he's going to kill somebody at the border under the instruction of his superior, he is not going to be tried in the court of law by the Indian government. He is going to be given a medal, right? He's going to be, his efforts are going to be appreciated by the government. But if he does the same killing, the same act of killing, if he does without the instruction of the superior or without the government sanctioning it, then he's going to be tried in the court of law. So the activity is the same, taking your gun and shooting the person, right? The activity is the same, but because he's doing it under the instruction of Krishna, he is not going to be taking the karmic reaction for it. (2.20)
न जायते म्रियते वा कदाचिन् नायं भूत्वा भविता वा न भूयः अजो नित्यः शाश्वतोऽयं पुराणो न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे.
For the soul there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever-existent, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain.
So na jayate mriyate, there is no birth and there is no death. Okay, and then Krishna says that he is ajo. Ajo means he is unborn. He does not come into existence. So let's read the translation slowly. For the soul, there is neither birth nor death at any time, because the soul is eternal. Remember, there is never a time when you did not exist, nor I, nor all these kings, nor will there ever be. So the soul is eternal. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. So the same thing Krishna is again repeating here. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. So the same points Krishna is again repeating here. So we have to understand that although we are eternal and Krishna or God is also eternal, still there is a difference between the two. We are same to God in quality, but we are not the same in quantity. We are qualitatively the same, but quantitatively different. So the example here is, if you have a mountain of gold and you take one part of that mountain, in quality, it's going to be the same. That small gold particle is going to be the same. Let's say that mountain of gold is 916 gold, right? The same quality of gold is also going to be there in that small part. That is also going to be 916. But there is a vast difference in the quantity, right? That may be 1 gram, the particle may be 1 gram, but the mountain may be so many kilos of gold. So like that, we are the same in quality as God, in the sense that we are also Sat, we are also eternal, We are also full of knowledge, Chit and Ananda, always blissful. We means not when we are in this material body, but the spirit soul, right? The spirit soul is Sat, Chit, Ananda. God is also Sat, Chit, Ananda. So we are the same as God in quality, but we are not the same as God in quantity. We are always going to be the servants of God. We are eternally his servants. We are meant to serve him. We cannot be equal to him in quantity. We cannot be the controllers. We are only going to be the controlled, irrespective of whether we are in the material realm or in the spiritual realm. Okay. So we are the same in quality, but we are not the same in quantity. Another example is if I take some water from the Pacific Ocean in a test tube, right? The water in the test tube is going to be the same in quality as the water in the ocean. The minerals that are found in the ocean, in whatever proportion is, and the test tube water will have the same amount of minerals in the same proportion. Yes, but still in quantity, there is a lot of water in the ocean, but there is very little water in my test tube. I cannot throw the water in the test tube on Japan and say that tsunami has come, right? That small water in a test tube is very small in quantity. It cannot cause a tsunami. But the water in the ocean can cause a tsunami in Japan or whatever country, right? So we are the same in quality, but we are not the same in quantity. Very, very important concept. Does anybody have a question on this Satchitananda? Are we okay?
Okay.
All right, 21.
Veda vinashinam nityam ya enamajamavyayam katham sapurushah partha brahmadayati hantikam.
O Partha, how can a person who knows that the soul is indestructible, eternal, unborn, and immutable kill anyone or cause anyone to kill?
So what Krishna is saying here, the soul is Avinashi. Avinashi means it is indestructible. Then he says that the soul is Nityam. It is eternal. It is Ajam, means it is unborn. And it is Avyayam. It is immutable. It cannot be killed. So the soul cannot be killed. So one who knows that the soul is indestructible, eternal, unborn, and immutable, how can he kill someone or cause anyone to kill? How is it possible that you are going to kill Bhishma and Drona when actually the soul cannot be killed? Let's read this.
I don't want to die. Our fear of mortality is a pointer to our immortality. Our bodily misidentification has imposed fear on us. By Bhakti Yoga, we can realize our spiritual immortality and transcend the fear of death.
So nobody likes to die, isn't it? Nobody likes to die. Nobody likes to get a disease. Nobody likes to grow old. Why is it? You know, big buildings and everything is destroyed over time. Even great big mountains, rivers, everything comes to an end with the passage of time. But still, we don't want to die. Why? Because actually the soul never dies. Because it's our nature. It's the nature of the soul to live eternally. And now that we are in this body, the death is forced upon us. Old age, disease is forced upon us. But it is not in the nature of the soul to die or to get a disease. So the fact that we don't want to die is a pointer, is an indicator that actually we are eternal. We are not supposed to go through death, disease, old age, right? So we have to ask ourselves, when everything can be destroyed, why do I have the desire to live? Why? Because we are the souls and the soul does not die. So that is an indication that we are not the body, we are spirit soul. 22.
Vasamsi jirnani yatha vihaya navani grihnati naroparani tatha sharirani vihaya jirnani anyani samyati navani dehi.
As a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless one.
So here Krishna is explaining the process by which the soul moves from one body to another body. And he's explaining this with an example. What he's saying, just as how a person puts on new garments, giving up the old ones. When our clothes are dirty, we change them, we wear fresh clothes. In the same way, when the soul, when the body is old and useless, then the soul gives up the old body and takes up a new body. So he's explaining the process by which the soul transmigrates from one body to another body. Let's read this.
Does the immortality of the soul recommend violence? No. A. Supporting reference Vedic injunction 2.19 purport, Ma himsyat sarva bhutani. Never commit violence to any living entity. B. Criteria to use violence. Killing the body of anyone without authority is abominable and is punishable by the law of the state as well as the law of the Lord. Violence has proper utility under authority. 2.21 purport, no sinful reaction. Who decides the proper utility? A man situated in complete knowledge knows how and where to apply a thing for its proper utility. D. Analogy. Justice of peace. Reference Manu Samhita. For details, study 2.21 purport. Surgeon's knife. Proper use can save one's life. For details, study 2.21 purport. E. How to justify Arjuna's use of violence. He was killing for the principle of religion, not whimsically. When Krishna orders violence, it is for supreme justice. For administration of justice, so-called violence is permitted because anyway the soul cannot be killed.
So this is a summary of the past few verses. So somebody may say that, okay, the soul does not die. So if I can kill someone and the person will not die because the soul never dies. But that's not what we learn from the Shastra. The Shastra says, Ma himsyat sarva bhutani. Never commit violence to any living entity, not only human beings, but we are not supposed to commit violence to any living entity. That's why one of the 4 regulative principles is no meat eating, right? So we are not supposed to commit any kind of violence to any living entity. Now, so how to justify Arjuna is going to kill? The justification here, as we discussed, is he is going to do this under the instruction of Krishna. And we already saw the example how the court of law is not going to punish a person who has killed. If he's in the army, navy, or air force, and he has killed under the instruction of his superior, he is going to be awarded. He is not going to be punished by the court of law. So there you can justify the violence of that person who's in the defense forces. In the same way, Arjuna's killing has been justified, but that doesn't mean that we can go and kill another living entity and say that no, but the soul does not die. That's not what we learn from this section. These are all points from the purport. So please read the purports. It's very, very important. So death is a comma. It is not a full stop. Death does not mean that okay, that's it, finished. All my suffering or all my pleasure, everything has come to an end. No, death is only a transition. Death means what? The soul is transmigrating from one old body to another brand new body. If it's a material body, it may be the body of an ant, it may be the body of an elephant, it may be the body of Lord Brahma also. Yes. And if we are in the spiritual realm, then we have a spiritual body.
Will you,
so death is not the end, it is the new beginning. Sorry?
Will you please repeat the link where we can see the purports,
Yeah, I will. When we finish the class, I will show you on the website. I'll share my screen, then you can see how to read it. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So
As a person,
yeah, sorry.
No, sorry. As a person puts on new garments, giving up the old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old
and useless ones.
and useless ones.
So the bottom line is life doesn't start at birth and it does not end at death. It's just that the soul is transmigrating. How many kinds of bodies exist? Anybody knows the answer?
86,000 species.
84.
86,000?
Species.
No.
8,400,000.
Exactly. 8,400,000. That is correct. So Disha, you have a very good memory, huh?
Yeah, this was from our class like 7 years ago.
Yeah, I know. 7 years ago you learned. Very nice. So 8,400,000 different kinds of bodies exist, right? So how many bodies have we changed? 1, 2, 3. Can you count?
Yeah.
Does anybody remember how many bodies we have had in the past? It's not possible, right? We have changed millions and millions and millions of bodies, right? We don't remember them, but we have gone through so many, and there are 8,400,000 different kinds of bodies that exist. Okay.
8,400,000. 400.
Yes, yes. 8,400,000 or
8
84
million
lakh.
400,000.
Yes.
Okay.
But ma'am, is it true that after these 8,400,000 only we get the human birth? So it will be 8,399,000 births ke baad we have got the human birth.
Yeah, no, out of these 8,400,000, no, out of these 8,400,000, 400,000 are human bodies, different kinds of human bodies. Okay, we are talking about human bodies not only on planet Earth, but remember all those universes. So in all those other universes that Mahavishnu has created, there are other different kinds of human bodies. So there are 400,000 different kinds of human bodies. Okay, and we may get that human body after we've see there are aquatics, then we have the plants and the trees, then we have the insects, the birds, and the four-legged animals, and the last 400,000 are the human species. Okay, and the first body that we get when we fall down to the material world, what's the first body that we get? We have said this before in the class. Did we say it or no? Nobody remembers? Or was it slot 2? I don't remember that now. The first body that we get when we come to the material world is the body of Lord Brahma. So all of us have been Lord Brahma once in our lifetimes at least. Okay, that's the first body that we get. So Brahma is actually a post. Brahma is not a person. There is a difference between the person and the post. Lord Brahma is a post, and one who qualifies himself can attain the post of Lord Brahma. This is how the president of the country is a post, isn't it? One who wins the elections and qualifies himself can be called as a president. Like that, Brahma is a post. So the first body that we get is that of Brahma. Our Brahma, whoever he is our current Brahma, but down when he finishes his lifetime, Lord Brahma lives for 100 of his years, that is billions of years. We will see that in a future class, how to calculate the life of Brahma. Okay, there is a great detail, but that is for another class. But when he finishes his term, 100 of Brahma's years, then somebody else is appointed as Brahma. Okay, so even Brahma is one kind of a body. Okay, let's read this.
Body is equal to dress. Transmigration is equal to replacing one dress with another. Desires play a key role in determining our cloth dress. Similarly, they play a key role in determining our bodily dress. Our bodily dress is not only a product of our desires, but is also a vehicle for them. Every material body is a bad deal for us. Use the power of our desires to our advantage by choosing the best desire. Regain our original form, our eternal dress, our Swarupa, and serve Krishna eternally and aesthetically.
So every material body is a bad deal for us. Although not all material bodies are as degrading, you know, we have which body is better than the human body? Which body is better than the human body?
Spiritual?
Yeah, spiritual body is the
Desireless.
best, but in the material realm, which body is better than the human body? In the material realm,
Desireless body.
desireless bodies, no, kind of body. Like we just discussed that there are 8,400,000 different kinds of bodies, right? So which body is better than the human body?
Brahma.
Brahma. Why?
Uh, it's like a pope. It's like best body. Creator, because Brahma is a creator.
Yes, the body of Brahma or the body of any demigod, right? The demigods, their bodies are superior to human bodies because they have more, they can live in the heavenly planets for an extended period of time, for a long period of time. So yes, although their bodies are not as degrading as our bodies, right? They are better bodies than us. Still, even accepting the body of a demigod or the body of Lord Brahma is a bad deal. Why? What have we lost out? We have lost out on Satchit Ananda. Even in the body of a demigod, we are not eternal. As we said, Brahma's life also comes to an end after 100 years of his life. So where is the question of Brahma being eternal, right? So we, even if we have better bodies than human bodies, still we have lost out on Satchit Ananda. So accepting any kind of material body is a bad deal. So now that we have done it, right, we have already got this material body, the best thing for us is, in this situation, use this body in the service of the Lord and then attain our Satchit Ananda, regain our original form, our eternal rest, our Swarupa, our original Rupa, right, our original form. Let us regain that by serving the Lord eternally and ecstatically. Okay. So what kind of body we get is determined by what we did in the previous lifetime, as we discussed. Who can interpret the picture on the left corner of your screen? Can anybody interpret what is happening there?
It's Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa, I think.
Mona Lisa? No, that's not Mona Lisa.
It's a lady who's exposing herself.
She's exposing herself. So as a result of it,
she gets the birth of a tree.
She now her next body is that of a tree. Why?
Because trees don't have
uncovered.
clothes.
Because
trees don't have clothes.
Uncovered.
Yeah, she likes to expose her body with minimal clothing and she wants it to be in full view for everybody to see, right? And as a result of that, she has got the body of a tree where the tree is in full public view with no clothes on and is free to be seen by everybody. Okay, next, let's move in clockwise direction. After that, what is happening in the picture? Who can interpret that?
The man is eating meat.
Okay, and as a result?
He turned into a tiger.
Yes, because he likes to eat meat, he is given the body where he has facility to eat meat. He gets the body of a tiger or a lion, any meat-eating animal. Then next, where we see a pig, what is happening?
The man is sleeping.
Okay, the man is sleeping. So
he gets the body of a bear or polar bear.
Yeah, if somebody loves to sleep, right? He likes to sleep too many hours. Then in the next life, he gets the body of a polar bear where he has unlimited, he can sleep for 6 months at a stretch, right? Because in that body, you are given the unlimited facility to sleep. After that, last. Ayush, are you going to go for it?
A man that was eating what he
Like a man eating things from the garbage becomes a pig.
Why? Because the pig eats indiscriminately, right? The pig eats, what does a pig eat usually? Eats stool. The pig is not discriminating between what is good and what is bad. If you give the pig very nice hot gulab jamun, the pig is not going to relish it. The pig is going to enjoy eating only stool and trash. So when we eat indiscriminately, then we are given the body of a pig. Okay, you like to eat indiscriminately, then all right, you can enjoy eating crap in the body of a pig. Why do you need the human body? The human body is only meant for realizing God. That is the reason why this human body has been given to us. But if we don't use the human body to realize God and we use it for these other activities, then in the next lifetime, the human body is going to be taken away from us and we will get the kind of body that is suitable according to what we desire. If we like to sleep, we get the body of a polar bear. If we like to explore, then we get the body of a tree, like that. So this current body is a result of our past activities, and our future body is going to be decided according to what we are doing now. So the moment to moment choices we make determine our future. See, there are 4 basic activities: eating, animals also eat; sleeping, but animals also sleep; mating, animals also mate; and defending, animals also defend. Most of the human population are engaged in these 4 activities: eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. But human body is not meant to only eat, sleep, mate, and defend. Human body is to realize God. But if we use the human body only to eat, sleep, mate, and defend, then we are no better than 2-legged, sophisticated animals. We are animals, but we are sophisticated animals. Why? Because they are eating, sleeping, mating, and defending on the road. We do it in our homes, indoors. That's all. So we can call ourselves sophisticated 2-legged animals. We are no better than animals. So human body is meant to, this is the goal of human life. This is the story of who? What's the name? Gopakumar. Which book?
Brahma Samhita.
Brihad Bhagavatamritam.
Brihad Bhagavatamrita. And who's the author of the book?
Sanatana Goswami.
Sanatana Goswami, yes. So see, the 3 stages of reincarnation. One is the soul leaves the body. Then the soul, under the guidance of the super soul, travels to the next body. So the next body, of course, the super soul has to sanction it, right? And then the soul finally acquires a new body. So these are the 3 stages of reincarnation. The soul leaves the body, then the soul travels to the next body, and finally he acquires a new body. So this is the process of reincarnation. Now, unless there is no reincarnation, there is no way how we can explain why children suffer. For example, the Pope was asked, I read it on the internet, that he went to do a program somewhere and a child asked him, why do we children suffer, right? And the Pope embraced her and he had tears in his eyes. The child also was crying, and he said, I have no answer to this question, because they do not believe in reincarnation. Yes, but if there is no reincarnation, how are you going to answer the question as to why children suffer? If everybody is starting with a blank slate at birth, then why some children are suffering? Some children are born blind, right? So the suffering has started. He is born only blind. So what is the reason? How are we going to explain it? There is no possible explanation. The only way to explain this is by the process of reincarnation that we are carrying on from the previous lifetime. That's why some children suffer at birth itself and some children are enjoying right? Somebody is born in so much poverty that to have one meal a day is also a struggle for that child. Another one is having the luxury of choosing what to eat and what not to eat, right? So if everybody is starting from a blank slate at birth, then how are you going to explain why children suffer? But we have the answer to this question. Why children suffer is because we are carrying on from a previous lifetime.
What the super soul? How to denominate it is super soul?
Yeah, the super soul accompanies us life after life after life. So at death, the soul and the super soul both leave the body. Yes. And both the soul and the super soul enter into the new body. So the super soul is with the soul life after life after, even in the body of an ant, cat, rat, hippopotamus, Brahma, the super soul is present along with us. Only
Same
when
super soul.
Huh?
Same super soul.
Same
pair of
soul,
super soul.
Same,
Okay.
yes, same super soul. The super soul leaves the soul only when the soul enters the spiritual realm. Because in the spiritual realm, there is no function of the super soul. See, the super soul has two functions in the body, Upadrishta and Anumanta. Upadrishta means it oversees our functions like a witness. Yes. And Anumanta is like a guide. Sometimes we say, no, my conscious is pricking me. I cannot do this. What is that conscious? What is that inner voice that is telling us this is right and this is wrong? It is the super soul that is prompting us from within what to do and what not to do. Right. So the super soul has these two functions. Once we enter the spiritual realm, then we don't need the super soul. So the super soul accompanies us as long as we are in the material realm. Okay. Let's read this text.
Have we become the slaves of our clothes, material bodies? Slaves. Slaves are forced into bonded labor. Conditioned souls. We are forced to labor for fulfilling the body's endless desires. Slaves are stripped of self-respect. Conditioned souls. We are stripped of our self-respect and even our self-knowledge. Slaves are denied life's pleasures. Conditioned souls, we are denied of the real pleasures that is our natural right as souls. How do we break free from this slavery? When we equip ourselves suitably by practicing bhakti yoga, we no longer remain slaves of the body, but use it as our servant in our spiritual pursuits.
So here is a comparison of the slaves and us, the conditions. Conditioned means the soul is actually Satchitananda, but because we are in a particular kind of body, we are forced to behave in a particular way. For example, if the soul is in the body of a dog, then the soul is forced to behave like a dog, barking unnecessarily. If the soul is in the body of a pig, then the pig is eating stool and the soul has to go through that experience because it is in the body of a pig. So conditioned state means that we are forced to behave in a particular way because of the kind of body that we have attained. So the slaves are here compared to the conditioned souls. And the only way that we can break free from the slavery, that we can really get relief from this material condition of life is when we practice bhakti. Krishna says many times in the Gita that if you want to know me, if you want to reach me, if you want to come to me, then bhakti, bhakti, bhakti. There is no other alternative. There is no other way to it. So here Prabhupada explains a concept of the soul. And here we will discuss your point, Munesh Prabhu. You can see here there are two birds. Both are sitting on the same branch of the tree. The bird on the left is busy enjoying the fruits of the tree. The bird on the right is just observing the activities of the bird on the left. So the bird on the left refers to us, the conditioned souls, and the bird on the right is the super soul. And that branch is referring the heart, because both the soul and the super soul are present in our hearts, isn't it? So both these birds are the same branch, but we are so busy. The conditioned soul is so busy enjoying this material world that we are not turning our face towards the super soul. This bird that is eating the fruit is not turning its face towards the bird on the right. So we are forgetting to turn towards the super soul, to turn towards the Paramatma for guidance. And this bird, the Paramatma bird, is waiting, patiently waiting, so that the bird can finish eating the fruits, or the bird at some point will turn towards this other bird. So that's what the super soul is doing. The super soul is always present for our guidance. But if we have to seek the guidance, so that is a function of the super soul. So these two birds on the tree, this is a very, very famous painting. And Prabhupada explains this in the purport, how the super soul and the individual spirit soul are on the same branch. One is enjoying the fruits and the other is waiting for this first bird to turn towards the other bird. So soul and super soul. (23)
Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakaha, na chainam kledayantyapo, na shoshayati marutaha.
The soul can never be cut to pieces by any weapon, nor burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by the wind.
So Krishna continues to describe characteristics of the soul. So he's saying that it cannot be destroyed by any weapon or fire or water or withered by the wind. Previously, they had the kind of weapons, they had water weapons, they had wind weapons, and they had fire weapons. Yes, but now in the modern society, only the fire weapons are left. Now nobody can destroy by water or wind. These weapons are not available now, but you will see in the Mahabharata war how water weapons and wind weapons also were used. So Krishna is saying that with none of these weapons, the soul can be destroyed. So the soul is waterproof, bulletproof, fireproof, and windproof. So this example we have already seen how. Let's read the text.
The living entities are externally separated parts and parcels of the Supreme. For example, the seeds of a fruit, although a part of the fruit, yet are separated, then have their own individual identity. Individual souls are like the sparks of a fire. The sparks have the same quality as the fire, although limited in quantity. They are prone to be extinguished when out of the fire. Separated individual souls have similar quality as the Supreme Soul, although limited in quantity, being unchangeable. The infinitesimal soul can never become equal to the infinite Supreme Soul.
So we have already seen the watermelon example. The other example is how the sparks of the fire, once the spark leaves the fire, then the spark has every probability of being extinguished. As long as that spark is within the fire, it will continue to burn. Or another example, there may be a very big machine and the machine has many screws, right? If a screw falls off from the machine, then that screw is only going to be discarded. It is, they will replace it with another screw. So as long as the screw is attached to the big machine, there is value to the screw. Once the screw falls off, then what value does that screw have? So we also have value as long as we are connected to the Lord. Once we move out, once we turn our face away, then we will be extinguished like that spark that has fallen out of the fire, or the small screw that has fallen off from the big machine. There is no value to us if we turn our face away from the Lord. Shall we stop here? We'll do 24 onwards in the next class. So we have some time for questions.
So you were explaining the link of the.
Yes. Thank you. I'll tell you right away. Okay, so you go to Veda. You can see the screen, right? You go to vedabase.io, and here you can choose the language. This is English here by default. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
So here you have it in different languages, but Hindi is not available because I remember you asked me for Hindi once. We don't have Hindi here. So you have different languages. You have it in Spanish also here. And you go to English. And here you have the different books. Bhagavad Gita is here.
It is vedabase.io.
Yes, vedabase.io.
Okay.
So here you have Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
And here you have chapter 2. You click on the chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And here you have only the translations of the various verses, right? If I go to text 1, then it opens up. So here I have the shloka in
Okay.
the original shloka written in Sanskrit, and then in Sanskrit, but with English alphabets. You have the word to word synonyms.
Mm-hmm.
You have the translation, and here you have the purport.
Okay, perfect.
So when you go here next, you can go to the next verse, verse number 2. But if you want to directly go to say verse number 24, so you go to chapter 2, and here you can go directly to verse number
24.
Yeah, you open verse number 24, and here you can read the purports. So it will be very nice if all of you can read the purports in advance for the next class.
This is wonderful. And important that there are certain sublinks also, some Puranas links and all. That also will be available here, or we have to open other book like Puranas?
Yeah, see here you have Bhagavad Gita, you go to library. Here you have the Srimad Bhagavatam. Chaitanya, all, yeah, so books that Prabhupada wrote or books that are written by his disciples are here. Puranas, actually 75% of the Vedas are not available for human reading now. We have lost them. Okay. So here you have
in our only our speech, classes, we just give sometime reference of some Puranas,
those say, you'll see here Prabhupada will quote. Let's go to chapter 2. And let's say today we saw, was it in 12? Never was there a time. Let's see in this. See here, for example, Prabhupada is quoting from the Katha Upanishad in the purport, like that.
Yeah.
So this we use in our classes.
So the Katha Upanishad, there's no need to open the Katha Upanishad,
No, we don't have it only to open it. This Prabhupada is quoting, but we don't have it for our, it's not available.
Okay, for our continuation, we don't need it because it is already there, the particular script.
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
Okay, fine, perfect.
Okay.
Right. Thank you.
Anything else? So you have the Ramayana and the Mahabharata also. Here. Oh, we don't have the Bhagavatamrita and those. Oh, we don't have that. Oh, it's not there. Okay, so you have the Brahma Samhita. But you can download the PDF. PDF is available. You just Google PDF of Bhagavatamrita by Sanatana Goswami and you can read it.
Bhagavatamrita, no?
Yes. So we have somebody here who's joining us for the first time. Varun Ahuja, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so welcome to our class. He's joining us for the first time. I hope that we will continue to see you for our future classes.
Yeah, sure. Till the end, in fact.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. What else we have to discuss?
It's comfortable. Everything satisfactory was there.
Okay.
There's no question at all.
Okay. How many of you are chanting after our last class? Anybody started to chant?
Only one.
One round?
On one round.
Are you doing one round every day?
Yes.
Oh,
Very nice. 2 times in a day.
Excellent. Very good. Who else? Neha, are you doing? No? I thought you raised your hand.
No.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Anybody else is chanting?
Me, I do 3 rounds
Varsha,
every day.
Varsha is doing 3 rounds every day. Very nice. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, hopefully by next week. Are you all reciting 2.7 every day? That key verse, the turning point of the
No.
Gita?
No.
No? Oh, please try and
Okay,
recite.
we'll
It will
recite.
not even take you 15 seconds. 15 seconds.
2.7, the second chapter, 7 verse, no?
Yes. 2.7 is the turning point. That's where Arjuna tells Krishna, no, please instruct me. I am a soul surrendered unto you.
Yeah, that is already, it's a common prayer when we wake up in the morning or sleeping before that. That's a common prayer, no? That I'm surrendered to you. Please, you take care. It
But
was a
when
good day.
yes,
It was a good day given gift to. This is a common prayer, you know. It is.
yes. But when we recite the shloka in Sanskrit, then it has even more potency.
That we have to. We have to go through it.
Yes. Okay. Anything else we need to discuss?
Hey Shinama, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Supriyo.
Yeah, so tomorrow is the Guru Purnima. How do you recommend to do the fasting? Because there's a lot of ways. Just wanted to know.
Yes, tomorrow is the appearance day of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as we have discussed, is the combined form of Radha and Krishna, and he is the most merciful avatar. He's even more merciful than Krishna, because Krishna had one condition: first surrender unto me. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us this Hare Krishna mantra freely, right? Previously it was a hidden mantra, but he's freely given it to us so that anybody can chant, irrespective of whether we are vegetarians or not vegetarians, or whether we are child or adult, anybody can chant. So tomorrow is his appearance day, and we Vaishnavas fast till moonrise. So you check the time of moonrise on internet of your location, wherever you are located, and if possible, you chant till moonrise. After moonrise, you can break your fast. If you can't do up till moonrise because somebody is not used to fasting or whatever reason, if you cannot do till moonrise, then you see how far you can go. Okay. But the recommended is we fast till moonrise.
Okay, without water, right? Without
Yes,
taking water.
yes. If you can, without water, and if you can't, then you drink water. Water is something that will break the fast and at the same time not break the fast. There is a story of Ambarish Maharaj in the Bhagavatam, where so water is something that will break and not break. If you can do completely without water, then it's the best. But if you can't do, then you drink water, but you don't eat anything. So it goes according to your level. You have to see your health, your how you feel. We don't want to torture. So if your health does not permit, then please don't do it. We don't want to torture anybody. We want people to transcend, not torture. So you see how far you can go.
Right. Okay, no issues. And usually we do average 16, myself 17 rounds of chanting per day. So tomorrow, how many rounds you recommend?
As much as you can. As much. There is no as the more you do, the more mercy you will get of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Okay. All right.
So so for those of you who are not chanting, tomorrow is a very good day to maximize it. At least tomorrow, try to chant as much as you can for the appearance day of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and get his mercy. Okay. What else?
Thanks to you. That is the final.
Okay.
It is really, thank you very much for giving so much knowledge. And
it's my pleasure. Thank you for joining. All right then. So see you all next Sunday if Krishna so sanctions. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so
Hari
much.
Bol, wonderful class. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.